Okay, so this will be my first example in graphing uh, the sine function in the form of y equals a sine x. A is a real number. Okay, so my first example is graph y equals 2 sine x and compared to the graph of y equals sine x. Now, if you're going to notice, no, if we're going to um, give value of x, the value of y will be twice as large as it would be with y equals sine x kasi times 2 siya. Okay? So, magiging doble yung ating value of y as compared nung y equals 2 sine x as compared to the function y equals sine x. Okay? And also, for this example, you're going to learn what an amplitude is. Okay? Now, i-graph muna natin and let us compare the graph of y equals 2 sine x to the graph of the function y equals sine x para maintindihan natin yung amplitude. Okay? Kuha tayong table of values but this time in horizontal form. We have x. Dito natin ilagay si sine x. Dito natin ilagay si 2 sine x. Okay? Para kita natin yung comparison. Tapos yung angle natin is 0, pi over 2, 90. And then let's say pi is 180, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Ganun lang. Okay. If x is 0, sine 0 is 0. Therefore, sine 0 is 0 times 2 is also 0. Okay. Sine 90 is 1. Therefore, sine 90 is 1 times 2 is 2. Sine 180 or sine pi is 0. Therefore, 2 sine pi is also 0. And sine 3 pi over 2 is negative 1. This is negative 2 kasi twice lang ng sine x. Sine 2 pi is 0. Therefore, this is also 0. Now, papansin nyo, for a given value of x, the value of y is twice as large as it would be for y equals sine x. No? Twice lang. Okay? Tingnan natin yung kanyang graph para may compare natin yung dalawa. Ganun din ang magiging case kung negative pi ha. Kung negative pi, negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 pi over 2, and negative 2 pi. Yan, tingnan nga natin. Negative sine negative 90 is what? Negative 1. Negative 2. Check natin para ma-sure natin. Kasi nasa kababa yun eh. So, sine negative 90 is negative 1, of course. And sine negative 180 is 0. This will be 0. Sine negative 3 pi over 2 is positive 1. This is positive 2. Sine negative 2 pi is 0. This is also 0. So, pag renap natin, we have pi over 2 pi, 3 pi over 2, this is 2 pi, negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 pi over 2, this is negative 2 pi. This is 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, si sine x muna. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, pi over 2, 1, pi over 2, 1. And then 0, 0 ulit. 3 pi over 2, negative 1. and then 0. Dito, ganun din. Negative 1, 0, and then 1, 0. So ito si sine over sine x. 0, 0. Yan, okay. Ito si y equals sine x. So pagdating naman kay 2 sine x, we have 0, 0 also. Pi over 2, 2. Yun, tumaas. 0, 0 ulit. And then 3 pi over 2, negative 2 dito. We have 0 ulit. Pi over 2 ay dito. We have negative 2 here. 0. Then positive 2. Then 0. So, ito naman siya. Yan. So ito naman si y equals 2 sine x. Now, mapapansin natin, nag-ano lang siya, parang tumaas, no? Tumaas siya because of the coefficient of the sine function. Okay? Nabago lang sa kanya actually is the range. But when it comes to the domain, ganun pa rin. The graph continues at the entire domain of the x-axis. So therefore, the domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. But the range, nabago. Ang range na niya from negative 2 to 2. Ano pa? Yung amplitude. Ano yung amplitude? Ang amplitude dito, that is the periodic function, half the difference between the maximum and minimum values. Okay? Amplitude is half of the difference between the maximum and minimum values. So kung kukunin natin yung amplitude nito, difference lang ng max and minimum. Ito yung minimum, ito yung maximum. So ito ay pi over pi over 2, 1. Yun yung max. Ito yung min. That is 3 pi over 2, negative 1. Minimum, maximum. Kunin natin difference. Half daw nun. Half of the difference of the maximum and minimum. So maximum is 1 minus 1. So ibig sabihin 1 half 1 plus 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Oh, sorry. That's my mistake. Should be 2. So negative 2. So negative 2 minus negative 2. So we have 1 half. That will be 4. So ang kanyang amplitude ay 2. Okay? Ang amplitude niya ay 2. Pero para dun sa kanyang sine x, anong amplitude niya? Ay di 1, ano? Kasi ang kanyang maximum ay 1, kanyang minimum ay also 1. So ang kanyang amplitude will be 1 half 1 minus 1. That will be equal 1 half of 2. That is equal to 1. This is for y equals sine x. Ito yung y equals 2 sine x. Okay, so that is the amplitude. And let us formally define an amplitude. So therefore, the amplitude is defined as this one: the graph of y equals a sine x or y equals a cosine x with a not equal to 0 will have the same shape as the graph of y equals sine x or y equals cosine x respectively, except with range negative absolute value of a, comma, absolute value of a. The amplitude is absolute value of a. Okay? Ibig sabihin nun, parehas lang ang shape nila. Okay? Nung y equals sine x do sa y equals a sine x sa y equals a sine x. At yung graph ng y equals a cosine x, parehas lang ang shape do sa graph ng y equals cosine x. Magkakaiba lang sila ay sa range. Okay? Ang range ng y equals sine x, based for my example, ang range niya, y equals sine x, ang range nito ay 1, 1. Okay? Pero yung range ng 2 sine x is, negative 1 to 1, negative 2 to 2. So, doon lang sila nagkaiba sa range. But the shape, still the same. And when it comes to amplitude, ang amplitude niya is absolute value of A. So, for y equals sine x, itong amplitude niya, ito ko na lang ilagay, amplitude. Ang amplitude niya is the coefficient of the function sine x. Coefficient niya is 1, so therefore 1. Ang amplitude nito is the absolute value of 2, which is 2. Okay? So, ganon ang pag-determine ng amplitude. Whatever is the coefficient of the function, that will be the amplitude of that corresponding function. Okay? This is your amplitude. Okay? So that is how to graph a function in the form of y equals a sine x. And that is what we call the amplitude of the circular function. So thank you.